Another big shakeup in the West Wing. President Trump's communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, is out less than 2 weeks after being hired for the job. This is retired General John Kelly took command as the new White House chief of staff. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders explains why the change was made.
Look, the president certainly felt that Anthony's comments were inappropriate for a person in that position. And he didn't want to burden General Kelly also with that line of succession.
And take a look at how the broadcast news networks covered Scaramucci's firing tonight.
The staff bloodletting at the White House claimed Anthony Scaramucci today ousted this afternoon after a stormy 6 days on the job.
It was one of the fastest, crudest flameouts in West Wing history. Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, known simply as the Mooch, forced out after just 11 days on the job.
So far in the Trump presidency, there have been nearly half as many firings at the White House as in an average season of The Apprentice.
Oh my God.
Let's bring in Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry from outside the White House. So personally, I was sad to see the Mooch go. I thought he was bombastic, very loyal guy, very fun to cover, breathed a lot of life into the communication shop for a very short period of time. So there's two theories about what happened. Kelly comes in, he's disciplined, he's military brass, can't have anybody running wild to the press and saying these things, didn't look good, outside the chain of command, goodbye. And then there's other people that say this guy flew too close to the sun. He was kind of mini Trump, big ego, took up a lot of attention, didn't look good for the Trump brand, so people close to Trump said good night. How do you see it?
The sense from my reporting tonight, Jesse, is that it's both, frankly. I mean, if you go back to his one and only briefing where he did that little kiss to the media at the end, you know, Anthony Scaramucci said as an entrepreneur, he knew all about, you know, incrementalism and that you don't want to say or do anything too outlandish. You just basically want the 3 yards in a cloud of dust and just keep gaining ground. That's not what he did. He did flame out. From the beginning, he was all in. Then the profanity-laced interview with the New Yorker, one thing after another just piled up. And the second part of this, what you mentioned about General Kelly, this was served up to him on a platter. What better way for General Kelly on day one, hour one practically this morning, to say there's a new sheriff here, we're turning the page. Scaramucci basically, with all of the annex and all of the rest, made it actually quite easy for the new chief of staff to say, here's somebody I can throw aside. And if, you know, some of the other folks inside the White House, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner and others, they wanted to see Reince Priebus go. So for them, Anthony Scaramucci took care of business, if you will, got Priebus out, got Sean Spicer out, and now you have General Kelly, hopefully for, if you're Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, hopefully starting a whole new chapter for their father and father-in-law.
Man, maybe this was all an elaborate plan to bring in Scaramucci and bounce Reince.
Not that it was planned, but yeah.
Anyway, we're going to go around the table. Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Yeah, so I was listening to the press conference earlier with Sarah Sanders and then the press release, and there was also a statement earlier, I know Dave Bossie was on with Tucker, about next steps and whether or not he's going to do any other position.
Yeah, well, the press release was interesting, you're right, Kimberly, because it said that Anthony Scaramucci had gone to the new chief of staff, General Kelly, and said he wanted to offer him a clean slate so he could put his own team in place. That put it, you know, sort of framed it as Scaramucci stepping aside and resigning, basically. When Sarah Huckabee Sanders came out, she made it sound a lot more like a firing, saying the president was offended by some of the language that Scaramucci used in that New Yorker interview, that maybe there was too much going on, and it sounded more like he was pushed out. And frankly, it was confusing about whether or not he's going to go back to the Export-Import Bank, which is where he was before he came in as communications director, because you're right, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said flatly he doesn't have a role in the administration right now, basically. So maybe the door is open after the dust settles for him to go back to the Export-Import Bank. But even if he does that, that's a whole lot different than the job he was boasting about 10 days ago when he said, I've got access to the Oval Office, I report directly to the president, I don't have to go through Reince Priebus. Things have changed, and they've changed dramatically.
And now for someone who's very sad to see Scaramucci go, Juan Williams.
Hey, Ed, I'm still not clear on the sequence of events. As I understand it, the president over the weekend, some people say, soured on Scaramucci and the profanity-laced tirade given to the New Yorker. But then I hear other people say, oh, no, it was the new chief of staff, Mr. Kelly, who said he has to go. What's the case?
Well, I think the idea, and I'm glad you brought that up again. I mentioned it a moment ago with Kimberly that, the story going around from the White House is the president was offended by the profanity from Anthony Scaramucci. That has a lot of the president's critics tonight kind of rolling their eyes, saying, really, the president, locker room talk, he was offended by that? That sounds a bit more like cover. What was really going on here was General Kelly wanting to put his stamp as the new chief of staff on this White House. And with Anthony Scaramucci, he had a great opportunity to do that. And in fact, there are people close to Scaramucci suggesting over the weekend he was trying to get some sort of a vote of confidence from General Kelly, and it never came. And it's interesting that we got some pictures of Scaramucci in the Oval Office when the press got in about 9:30, 9:40 this morning after the new chief of staff was officially sworn in. He was in the Oval Office. Then about a half hour or so later, the president has a cabinet meeting. No sign of Scaramucci. So he was pushed out pretty quickly.
Dana Perino.
Well, I was curious if you hear anything within the White House in terms of staff just feeling maybe a sense of relief that that the Marines have landed and there's going to be just some calming of the seas in the West Wing.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about calming, the president started the day with a tweet saying that with the stock market rising to a record level, with the southern border being secured, some of his accomplishments being laid out that he doesn't think the mainstream media is giving him credit for, he put out this tweet saying there's no chaos here at the White House, making it like, yes, General Kelly's coming in and it's all going to be tranquil. And then a couple hours later, yes, there's even more tumult. So, frankly, what I've been hearing from advisors to the president and some staffers around here is that they're hoping that General Kelly is turning the page and restoring some order here in the medium term. But in the short term, this with Scaramucci leaving so abruptly is yet another example why a lot of people in this administration are on edge, because they don't know how many more people General Kelly will bring in to put his own stamp on the White House and how many people will be moving out. So in the short term, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Brace yourself, Ed. Greg has a question. Could be a statement. We're not sure.
I have a hypothetical question. Do you know who...
I don't answer hypotheticals.
Well, I'll answer it then. Do you know who lasted longer than Scaramucci at the White House? Anyone who's ever taken the tour. I don't want to hammer him too hard. He may end up working here. I don't want to make it awkward in the men's room. But I don't think it's about restoring order at all. It's about establishing order. We haven't had any order. And maybe you can agree with me, because that's what I'd like you to do. I think this is a good thing. And the reason why I think it's a good thing is because all of these reporters, Jesse included and Juan, are sad to see him go for purely the entertainment value, that he will always be giving these gaffes. He's an endless fountain of craziness. So it is a good thing to deprive the media of this opportunity for gaffes. It might mean an establishment of order, of everything settling down, as Dana says.
Yeah, if you strip away all the other media, gibberish about this and that and what's going on, some of what the president is tweeting about is absolutely true. The stock market keeps reaching record levels. General Kelly at the Department of Homeland Security has been cracking down on illegal immigration. People, a sharply reduced number of people, illegals, are trying to cross the border because they know there's literally a new sheriff in town. He is actually succeeding at some of the things he promised to do. But there's other big things like tax reform, like health care, that he's not yet succeeding at or struggling at. In the case of health care, tax reform, glass half full, because they're just starting to tackle that. And so the bottom line is, you go back to the Obama days, you can use the pen and the phone and do all the executive actions you want. That's largely what this president has done. But I think the lesson of the Obama years, among other things, is a new president comes in and undoes as many of those executive actions as they want. You have to lock in legislative gains. So the sideshows with Scaramucci, if that's out of the way, this president can finally maybe focus on those legislative goals he promised the American people on.
Okay, and just in my defense, since Gutfeld attacked me unfairly, I don't like Scaramucci for the gaffes. I like him for the laughs. But it's also
They're
because...
both the same thing.
No, not. I think we have a different sense of humor, Gutfeld. But I thought in his first press conference he was very effective in kind of disarming the media while at the same time coming out swinging. Now, I want to ask you before we let you go about this Washington Post story that's making some headlines. Trump dictated son's misleading statement on meeting with Russia lawyer, saying on Air Force One when the Trump Jr. Russia meeting story was breaking, the father, the president, came in and said, no, we're going to write it like this. They say it's misleading, and it's not very well sourced, so I'm wondering what your take on this is.
Well, some of this is probably hyped because the New York Times had already reported that on the way back from the G20 summit, the president and some aides were on Air Force One crafting that statement, had a direct role in what Donald Trump Jr. was going to say to the New York Times when that story first broke about the Trump Tower meeting in the summer of 2016. What is new tonight from the Washington Post is they're saying it wasn't just the president and his aides on Air Force One crafting a statement. They're claiming from their sources that it was the president himself sort of ripping up the statement, almost disavowing the advice from his advisors to be more transparent and get all the details out there. And instead, the president, they're claiming, the Washington Post tonight, directed this himself and put out a misleading statement that said this was about Russian adoption. It wasn't about the campaign. And as we all know now, new details kept dribbling out after that. So bottom line tonight, that's something that a lot of people are going to be hyperventilating about overnight. There's no crime, though, in a misleading statement that's put out. The question for the president is going to be, wait a second, is this part of a larger pattern of firing James Comey and doing other things that made it at least look like he didn't want the truth to come out, the facts to come out on Russia? Of course, the president would reject that narrative, but that's the case the Washington Post is trying to make tonight. I can tell you, I just spoke a moment ago with one of the president's top advisors outside the White House who told me after reading this Washington Post story, this advisor said, this is a problem because it's making it look like the president directed the misleading statement and was more involved in it than we knew before. A lot more facts are going to come out, as we've seen with other stories. So there's just screaming headlines at night. The next day, sometimes, other facts come out that make it sound a lot less innocuous. But tonight, I can tell you, I was talking to one of the president's advisors, they're a little concerned about this one.
And we don't know what happened because no one was there on Air Force One. But if it's true, I don't know if it's true, but if it is true, someone within President Trump's inner circle on Air Force One is leaking to the Washington Post, and that's a big
and
big
part
problem.
of the whole Scaramucci thing was, okay, now the leaks are going to stop, and then now all of a sudden this comes out. And think about what you just said, Jesse. I'm not picking on you, but this is the frustration of the Trump White House. If this is true, it would be a big deal and be really bad for the president. And yet a lot of news organizations are putting out stories that are, well, anonymous sources say this. We're not sure, really whether, we're going to lock this down or not. And they're deeply frustrated that one time after another, if this is true, it's going to be a big deal. They insist it's not true.
Thanks very much.